Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 296 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. All right, I'm your host, Anthony Renner. The show notes are located at continuefit.com. It's where I keep all my resources, including my book, Be Like the Best, and the Be Like the Best workbook, so you can check that out at continuefit.com. All right, today on the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner, spoke to Coach Boyle about some research that Alex and Tara did on unilateral loads. So we're going to go over this whole thing on what your loading should be with some of the unilateral exercises. We also talked about why he really kind of prefers the slider reverse lunge compared to the regular reverse lunge. For the TrainHeroic data-driven coaching segment, Adam and Tim discuss keeping your audience in focus. Remember, Coach Boyle and I both use TrainHeroic to deliver all of our online training. We've been blown away not only by the ability to connect with our athletes, but by their customer service. They just launched plans, so as low as $10 a month, and they have a free 14-day trial. If you mention we sent you, we're going to put a 4-week athlete development program in your account absolutely free. So if you're a coach looking for the best online training solution in the game, go to TrainHeroic.com, start your free 14-day trial. For the functional movement system segment, Greg Cook finishes his 3-part series on Readiness. And for the BodyByBoyleOnline.com, hit the gym with the Strength Coach segment, I have on Erica Suter. She's a performance coach to youth soccer players. Spoke all about coaching the growing female athlete. Lots of considerations. Talking about programming consideration for the young female athlete. Talking about dealing with parents, why there are too many skills trainers and what kids really need. And we talked about building empowered humans off the field. She does an amazing job. Has so many great ideas coming up from Erica in a little while. All right, lots of things to get to. So let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. You can try it out 30 days. That's right, 30, just $1. Access to all the articles, videos, and programs. And probably the best part of it is the forum. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. Lots of great conversations going on, as you can tell from a lot of our conversations here. He's on every day. So check that out at StrengthCoach.com. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ian. How are you?
All right. We were just talking about, just had to do a shout out. Congrats to Ariel and Kevin Carr. They got married this weekend. You just got back. So, wow, that was, it's exciting to see these young kids come in. They're interns. Then they end up married with kids. And it's just crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. And we've been very, very lucky because we had Brendan's wedding last summer, and he came back for this wedding with Jenny, who's obviously, they've all been now they're on sort of the Perform Better circuit. It's like watching your kids grow up, literally, for me, in terms of I've got this other generation of people that are just so talented, and I get to watch them in all of these big moments of their life. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, very cool. Coach, you posted on Twitter and on StrengthCoach.com on the forum, you were talking about one leg deadlift and skater squat. And one thing I was kind of confused, it is confusing, the loading is confusing, and you were talking about somebody named Alex Natara, and he's got a lot of info on unilateral strength to body weight ratios, which we're going to go over. But you were saying we've been really pushing our athletes this year to load unilateral exercises. That confuses me. First of all, were you not really pushing them with the loads?
I don't think we were pushing them hard enough with the loads. How's that?
Okay. So you're really trying to get them up there.
It goes back to the old, sorry to interrupt. I'm reading your book about listening, your Alan Alda book I started this morning.
Nice.
And I need to let you finish your questions better. Sorry. But with that said, it goes back to the how strong is strong idea when you kind of when you don't really have a target, it's hard to hit it. And then when you do, it's pretty easy.
That's interesting. So now that because of this research, the Alex and the Tara stuff, you're now starting to have a target. Now you feel like you can go in a direction and say, hey guys, we're starting. And also probably just from experience over all this time, now you're like, wait a minute, you see some girls go heavy and you're like, wait, they can do that. Wait, we got to raise the bar a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is in terms of when you start looking at the numbers and say, okay, I always talk about like, I love numbers, for a guy that doesn't really like data, I really like data. And I'm like amazingly incongruent as a human being, but they, when you start looking at the numbers and saying, okay, and this comes out of, I'll give a shout out, used to give one to Kevin, and this kid, Daz Drake. Now, I don't know Daz Drake from anybody, but he's a personal trainer, strength coach in England. And he was the one, he wrote an article. I actually Googled something about single leg strength. And strangely enough, an article about me and functional training for sports came up. And as I was looking through that article, it had this Alex Natera stuff in it. I will admit that up to that time, I don't know if I had heard of Alex before. And then I pulled up, I put the PDF or a picture of the PDF up on Twitter today. But it was, and I've talked about this in the podcast before, load comparison ratio in single and double leg movements. And it was, I believe, a poster presentation at like a UK SCA event or something like that. So I always talk about these, these amazing things that you find in kind of unlikely places. And I stumbled into this stuff and I started looking. And if you remember, this is where he talked about the weight of, they used some pilot data to calculate what weight of the body was the torso and arms and what weight was the legs. And they came up with the idea that 68% of body weight on average was somebody's arms and torso, which leads us at 32% for legs or 16% each leg. So when you look at a pure unilateral exercise, the person begins with a load that is 84% of their body weight. That's why I was saying about Connor, when you look at, if I took 84% of his body weight, it was 190. When you looked at what he was doing, I mean, he was pulling effectively 380 pounds up in that slide board lunge. And again, somebody said on Twitter, wow, imagine the number of plates you'd need to get that load. And you start thinking, imagine, when you said, okay, 380, we want to make that load whatever, 760, right? Yeah. Even subtracting the weight, whatever, okay, we want to make the bilateral load, okay, 550. It's a lot of plates. It's a lot of back stress. It's a lot of kind of, waddling in and out of a squat rack, trying to get similar loads or, loading up a really heavy deadlift bar, whatever it is. And it's just cool to kind of be in new ground and to look and think, okay, whether it's Mark and his friends and, all of a sudden they're single leg squatting with 40 pounds because, we're getting chains on them and getting dumbbells in their hands. And, we're getting our pro guys up into the 70-pound area. We had the video I put up the other day or on the site was, one of Jimmy VC with 15-pound dumbbells and a 30-pound chain. And, you start to see these guys just loading heavier. And the weird thing is I have old videos of us doing 100-pound single leg squats. And I kind of got away from it because I just didn't put enough energy into pushing the loading, like go up, go up, go up. And I'm actually going to do something that I haven't done before, which is we're going to go to sets of 3 today in the single leg squat. And I've tended to stay away from sets of 3 because I associate 3s in my mind with increased risk. But I don't think that's the case with single leg squat or, skater squat, single leg deadlift, that kind of stuff, so we're going to play with that a little bit today.
So let's just get this right. So if I weigh 100 pounds, that means when I do a body weight single leg skater squat or, what you're calling one leg deadlift now. If I do that, it's like lifting up 84 pounds and then you're thinking of, okay, if I have, 2 10-pound dumbbells in, right? It's not 84 pounds. It's now 104 pounds. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay.
And what he said, the difference in the next part of Natera's data, what they did is they looked at force plate data of one leg squat to two leg squat. And they basically came up with the calculation effectively that a body weight single leg squat was equal to, on the force plate, a body weight back squat. So if I just did my body weight one leg squat with 180 pounds, let's say 200, you said 200 pounds. If you did single leg squat with 200 pounds, the equivalent of that in a bilateral squat would be for you to have 200 pounds on your back.
Why?
So
Why are you taking out the torso because it's bilateral?
Right, because it's bilateral, but you're still moving. Like if you look, you'd be moving 400. Do you know what I mean?
Okay,
So,
yeah.
But it was just the force plate data that they did that came up with these ratios. And they basically said that when you can do a single leg squat with a weight equivalent to your body weight. So, if I could do a one leg squat with 200 pounds between, whatever, chains and dumbbells and vests and all that stuff, that would be equivalent to a triple body weight squat. Because it's pretty hard when you get to, you think trying to, handle body weight in single leg squat, it's a lot. But they said that 50% of body weight, which is what we're working towards, is a double body weight squat. So we're trying to push our guys. So our 200-pound guy, when he gets to the point that he can single leg squat 100, it would be like he was back squatting 400 in terms of the forces. So it really shows you from a bilateral deficit idea how the weights work. And that's why I said this data is so particularly important, because it's real. It's not, that's what I loved about the slide board lunge. People were, because we got really into rear foot elevated for a while, and people were always arguing about what's the back leg doing? How much is the back leg pulling on the stand or pulling on the bench and helping the person get up? Whereas in a pure one, whether you go pure one leg squat, single leg deadlift / a skater squat, which I think are the same thing, and or slide board lunge, that free leg is not contributing. It's just weight. It's just load. So it takes away the argument for the person who wants to argue with you about the minutia. You know what I mean? Like somebody wants to fight with you about, well, it's not really that amount of weight because, what are they doing with the back leg? Now it's like, okay, you look at that slide board lunge, that back leg can't do anything. It can't push or pull. It can only drag. It's just part of the load. It's not, there's no way that it can contribute to you getting up to the top. So it's pretty cool.
So yeah, that's really just there kind of, you're able to balance. It's going to help you kind of stay upright. And then
in some ways it's similar to the safety squat idea, like having one hand on the rack. You've got that back leg functioning as a rudder, so you're not falling over, but it's not contributing. There's no way that can help you to get up.
I wonder if there's some of the confusion too, is because you've talked a lot about in the past with the slide, using this even the Val slide, or using the slide board, driving. You've even used it as the analogy of, like, think of a rug and you're going to pull the rug to get. So that's a completely different thing.
Front leg, like you're just pulling yourself up all off your front foot. You know what I mean? There's really, that's what I said. If you really think about it, there's no way that back leg can do anything. Even if it pulls you into hip flexion, which you don't want it to do, it's not helping you get up. It's not helping. Like the right leg cannot help you extend the left leg like it could. In a rear foot elevated split squat, you can hook that stand or the bench and push down on it and use, sort of the quad and hip of that free leg to contribute. I don't know how much it contributes, but you can use it. You can't do that on the slide board. There's just there's no way to produce force versus, like I said, the pull. I always think what people, and maybe that's, I don't make the analogy well enough. It's like the idea of, like in sprinting, pawing the ground or pulling the ground through. That's what I think makes that exercise a hip dominant exercise, is that it really is a pull. You're not like pushing through the floor, trying to bring yourself up like you would in any kind of split squat. You're pulling.
Yes.
As if like the foot hit the ground in sprinting. Sorry, I just clapped my hands because I'm going through it in my mind. But it's that action, pulling of the ground action of the front foot that really changes things into more of a glute and hamstring exercise.
Yeah, yeah. Coach, this is not off topic, but it's kind of a off topic question. You're using the chains. I guess you feel like they're a little bit more sanitary now, especially you don't have to, the cleaning concerns with COVID. Some of these guys in the pro group, I mean, they make a little bit of money. Why don't you tell them to bring their own vest? I mean, come on, guys, get your own vest. Bring them in, man. This is important. Yeah. Single leg squats. You want to get in your next contract? Buy your own vest. Bring it in. Just because is it going to be harder to load, Mike, with these chains? And I know so you did the fire hose. Cool. That was a cool idea.
Yeah. See, that's me. I got cool ideas.
So yeah,
more fire.
Just so people know.
Shout out to Jeff Russo for getting me some old fire hose. My man Jeff.
So people who aren't on the site, you took you're cutting fire hose, putting the chain in there, so it just makes it a little bit more comfortable and increase obviously.
That was one thing that we were finding is that people didn't love the chains, and and I can see why they didn't love the chains. I mean, it's not all that comfortable to have, especially when you get into like a 30-pound chain and big links and all that stuff. I mean, I get it. It's not that comfortable. So by putting the hose on there, it makes it a little more kind of safety squat bar feel, yoke bar kind of a feel, but not like chains digging into your neck.
Yeah, there's going to be some perturbation, some movement there though too. So it's probably going to be a little bit harder to kind of control that weight.
Not much as you'd think. It stays pretty still. The other thing it works for, it's great now for like inverted rows instead of putting a plate on, because you can drape that over you. We've found it's working for a bunch of things. So it's become it's a pretty good idea. And as I said, we were trying to figure out, the weight vests themselves, because one, I think people keep them on too much. The fire hose does not tend to absorb, and I never thought about it, but obviously it's probably made to not absorb water because it gets wet.
Yeah.
It's not, those weight vests are super absorbent, and we would find the weight vests. I mean, the weight vests would get so nasty pre-COVID that some people wouldn't use them, particularly in the summer, because they just were like sweat sponges. And by midday, people would be like, okay, what's the alternative to putting that vest on? And we did have people, we had a couple of female clients who did go buy their own vests, because they were like, I'm not wearing those vests. Those things are the grossest things ever.
Yeah, I mean, it smells like Marky's hockey bag too, And so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they smell bad. It feels bad. It's it's like putting on a sweaty T-shirt. Like someone gives you, you take your T-shirt off and I put this back on. And you're like, I don't want to put that back on. It's soaked. Like, it's gross.
Yeah. Every hockey parent's worst, probably biggest complaint about hockey, not even the travel. It's that hockey bag that they bring back in the house.
Yeah. Sometimes we forget. Mark's left the bag in my car overnight. You get in the car and you're like, oh my God, there's something rolled up in the car and died. And then I realized that bag's in the back. It's my first thing I look for.
Coach, someone asked about thoughts on the slider and not the curtsy lunge at the end of the day, curtsy lunge. And you wrote, I can't say I don't like the exercise. I'm just not sure what the big point is. Did you really mean you don't, it's not that you don't like it, but you just don't know what the point is?
Well, I guess I don't know what the point is. And I don't intensely dislike it. I just look at it and think like what am I getting out of that? Why is this going to take the place of something else when I look at, because you are adding a little transverse plane component, I guess, at the hip. But to me, I don't know. It's just one of those kind of, it's sort of a cute variation, but I just can't see it being something that we could get a lot of long-term use out of. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I never liked it. I feel like it's one of those. It's kind of like a chop and lift for me. I like some of the chop and lift where some people I never taught because, and this is on me, I just couldn't get them to do it. They just couldn't understand it. And I feel like with the curtsy lunge, for the people that couldn't get it, you're you're risking some knee injuries. And, again, my lens is older men. It just like their knees, like it wasn't really a great choice. Yeah. So I never really.
I get it. Same thing. I just looked at it and thought, like, some people that like crossover step up, slide board lateral lunge. There's certain exercises that I look and think they look cool on Instagram, and they look really like whatever, hockey specific or whatever you want to talk about. But I just don't see where the real value is to replace something else. And I think that's the thing that you run into, particularly even more so now. We keep alluding to the COVID, but when you're limited in what you can do, you need to be going to your big bang for the buck kind of exercises, not playing around with kind of cute little variations. And I would put that in kind of the cute little variation camp.
Yeah. Coach, finish up really quick. You said you're reading, if I understood you, what I have is look on my face. What are your thoughts on it right now? Totally, I can understand if somebody didn't love it, but I feel like it's a book every coach should read. But thoughts on it right now first, any takeaways so far besides you need to be a better listener?
Well, but I think that's a really big point, though, that I need to be a better listener. I actually started it once before, so I had a bookmark in it, and then I just started again at the beginning because I was like, I really don't remember this. So I read that part twice about where he starts being like the narrator / interviewer for Scientific American.
Yes.
Talking to the first doctor that he talks to and realizing that he's not listening to the guy. And I just think I know for me, it's still a big problem. I'm a really good talker. I'm not always a really good listener. I'm so eager to get what I want to get across. It's always been a problem for me. I think it makes me a really good speaker because to be uninterrupted for, an hour or two. But I don't think it makes me the listener that I want to be. So he's just talking about like looking at somebody and seeing their reaction and being able to kind of shut your mouth for a minute and think, okay, I just need to be quiet here and let this person finish what they're saying. And then I need to look at their face and see kind of what is their reaction to what I say. And for me, I've already got enough value out of the book right now. And I'm probably only 20 pages in.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. It is something I think where, like just what you said, like when you're listening and I can't tell you how many coaches over the years in the podcast had told me that they were on other shows and somebody had a list of questions that they wanted to ask. And they're so concerned about asking those questions that they didn't realize that the person actually answered that question earlier through another answer. And they went and segued into it. And then they find that the host was actually asking them the same thing that they just answered and that they weren't really listening. They were so concerned about a list of questions. One thing I always tell podcasters when they call me and they say, I want to do a podcast, do you have any tips? I'm like, don't go by all your questions. Just have a conversation. Think of concepts, not question. And then you could just kind of go from there. And try to listen and try to come up with something that you don't understand. That's where the question comes from. So it's good stuff. I'm glad you're getting something out of it.
Well, you only need one question per podcast, and then I talk for 20 minutes.
Yeah, I shouldn't really talk. It's pretty easy with you, but the rest of the people, there you go.
It came from that forum thread when someone asked about listening, and you had suggested that book. And I've been really struggling with books lately. I said I just have books everywhere in various states of reading. I haven't been able to kind of grab one yet. We had our hot tub set on, like we cooled the water off for the summer, but now that it's getting cold again, what I usually do is I go sit in the hot tub in the morning for 15, 20 minutes and read. So it helps me to focus because I think, okay, I have a 15-minute period. I want to be in the hot tub for 15 minutes. I'm going to read while I'm here. I don't have to go anyplace else. And I need to try to do that more. Because I find, you talk about the 10 pages a day. I read more than 10 pages a day, but it might be 2 pages of stuff that people send me via email. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm reading, like it's like ADD reading and just getting bits and pieces of stuff all over the place.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, Coach. Well, on that note, we'll let you go. So thanks for doing this, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, thanks, Ian. I appreciate it.
All right, right now at Perform Better, it is free shipping over $49, so make sure you take advantage of that. Also, little insider tip here. I know a lot of companies have, been short with some equipment, dumbbells, some of the things that people wanted for their home, but Perform Better has restocked a lot of stuff. They've got a lot of stuff in right now, so check out the website or even call them. A lot of times when you call them, it's better. You can get on lists, etc. So check that out at performbetter.com. Don't forget, if you missed the summer series, the Perform Better app is coming out soon. All the recordings will be on there. They'll also be doing a fall speaker series with some new speakers, so stay tuned for that. Check it out at performbetter.com.
Welcome to the Functional Movement Systems segment. My name's Greg Cook, and this is part 3 of State of Readiness. Part 1, I just talked about, let's apply some of that stuff to ourselves first. And I'm actually talking more about the rest and regen part that could actually be one of the underlying causes of some of the movement problems. When your body is tense or unrested or dehydrated or something like that, you're not going to perform. And any stress we drop on you, even if the workout is perfectly designed and well coached, the seed's not going to land on really good soil. So we think about that personally in the way we show up, and then we can actually earn our stripes to confront other people when they show up not as ready as they could be. And I've noticed something since I've been sort of the strength coach and physical therapist that is the corrective guy. Believe me, I like doing manual therapy and I like doing coaching, but I get sucked into way more corrective than I need to. And one of the things I've experienced, especially in some of the really robust athletic arenas I've been in, military and kettlebell culture and stuff like that, where people just get after it, rain or shine, pain or smile, it doesn't matter. We're getting after it today. And what I've realized is I can take some very low level moves like half kneeling, especially on a narrow base, the setup we do for chops and lifts. And I can take some very strong and well-trained athletes and smoke them out right there. As a matter of fact, if you want to see a living, breathing example of that, there's an article up on the FMS website called Mobility, Control, and Symmetry Flows. And these flows go all the way back to some of the original work I did in athletic body and balance with a core board, meaning I don't think a single station exercise is nearly as corrective as 3 or 4 different postures and patterns blended together. Well, there you go. A sun salutation or a Turkish get-up accomplishes way more than the individual moves that you see within each of those things, because the transition is as important as the position, right? It goes from posture to pattern to posture to pattern. And so a lot of those signals can be manipulated. If you show up and you're already a little sympathetic, you can actually sometimes perform very comfortably in your narrow range of performance. But if I put you up against a mobility or stability problem, you will become quickly fatigued. But is it because I'm actually stressing your metabolism, or I'm challenging your neurological homeostasis or comfort zone? You will quickly go sympathetic in a pattern you don't do well, especially if I don't give you many options. So if you've got a jacked up low back or a tight hip flexor or something like that, half kneeling is going to impose a way bigger demand on you. And just think about it this way. It takes way more energy from your phone to install a new app than it does to run that same app. So I've smoked out a lot of people in a corrective and never meant to. However, if I already know your heart rate variability is high and I already know we're not going to push you today, I can put you in the corrective path that, say, a movement screen or balance test has told me you need. The mobility and stability scaled nutrient that you need very badly, I'm going to hand to you in the form of a corrective. But I know this corrective is going to leave you sweating, not because you're metabolically challenged, you're neurologically challenged. Your hip just doesn't like to extend. And for it to extend, you've got to lengthen one thing and activate another. You don't know how to do that. And Gray Cook's not going to tell you. I'm going to let you work out these postures and positions. And I know 2 things. You will get quickly fatigued. and I won't tell you how to do it. I will make you keep working out options and just managing your breathing, because in most situations, that's all you can control. You will see somebody break into a sweat. And in the article I just mentioned are 3 videos, 3 people right here on the FMS campus that I took through a flow targeted at a ankle mobility problem for my first challenge, the stability or control for my second athlete or client, and one athlete or client that actually had pretty good mobility and stability, but probably didn't have great symmetry. So I basically take a speed bump, a foam roll sliced in half long ways, and I use that perturbation in an age-old toe touch progression trick we used to do. And it's the breathing sync and the different movement patterns that sort of make you let go of the tone or the park and break that's holding you in a place. Some people are going to go sympathetic, but if I'm more concerned about letting you go ahead and get the triggers of these bad movement patterns dealt with in a safe environment. Remember, if I put you on your corrective, it's already been scaled to you. So biomechanically, it's not unsound, but it's going to fatigue you quickly. That's you going sympathetic because you're not aware of how to do this. And so we're going to let you sort of sweat it out. We're not going to hurt you. But if the next day you come back and your heart rate variability is a little bit better and you can last longer in the corrective, we're already reducing the triggers in normal movement, workout, and competition that are probably taking you too sympathetic, which makes you inefficient, which makes you not get in the zone, which makes you think way too much about what just happened or what's going to happen than what you're doing now. So we can use a movement corrective, obviously, to fix movement. But if I already know your heart rate variability is showing me that you're way more stressed out than you need to be just standing here, then I will actually use your corrective to hopefully change movement. But most importantly, put you under a neural stress of a normal posture and pattern that you somehow lost, and we're going to sit right here till you get it back. Because asking me questions about how much you should press or lift or squat or how far you should be jumping demonstrate the fact that you don't realize your car's already out of gas and you're planning a trip. So let's show you how to recalibrate your state of readiness. Let's use the correctives, not necessarily just fix mobility and stability, but stress you safely to move those triggers out and use heart rate variability as a state of readiness. You might have to wait a day or maybe even 3 or 4 days to see that recalibrate. But I'll tell you one other thing. Doing that corrective before you go to sleep actually does remove some of the tension that you will continue to accumulate. So if I've got a choice and I'm issuing a corrective, especially trying to manage somebody, we'll do 3 short sessions of the corrective for the first 3 days you do it. And all of a sudden, it's no longer a trigger. Now it's a benefit. Could be the best warm-up you ever did. Hey, this is Greg Cook for Functional Movement Systems. Thank you guys for listening to us. I did 3 parts on state of readiness. And up on the FMS website is this mobility, motor control, and symmetry flows. 3 different sessions with 3 different athletes that actually had the problem we were attacking, and they all measured better on the follow-up. But my first guy, Kyle Barrow, works with us, has some serious ankle mobility problems. He's the one that went sympathetic in this warm-up. But remember, each one of these had a test retest that I was looking to improve. It did it every time, real time, right there. Take these things, play with them, but remember, one is targeting mobility, one's targeting motor control, one's targeting symmetry, and if you don't know what you're going for, don't just randomly apply a corrective. Thanks, guys.
Hey, this is Adam.
This is Tim.
Welcome to the TrainHeroic Data-Driven Coaching segment.
Let's do it.
Tim and I are going to continue our trek through online coaching best practices.
Oh yeah, we're journeying.
Today, we're going to talk a bit about knowing your audience. Now, that might sound really simple, but we have a lot of firsthand experience with coaches who are trying to transition or grow their online business. It's a pretty universal, problem that the audience isn't always clearly in focus. And, this comes down to what we see specifically in some of these big names that are trying to sell in our marketplaces. They've got a big following on social media, right? They're good at marketing in some senses, right? People believe in them, right? When it comes to turning that into paying customers who stick with you, it doesn't always work out quite right. And some people do a lot better at than others. And Tim's going to talk about some of those things now.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of hit the nail on the head there. Stole my thunder, honestly. I think a lot of coaches or businesses in this industry focus on their audience as they try and put this cohort of people together, and it gives them an idea of who they want to target and go out and get and welcome these new athletes, as we call them at TrainHeroic, or customers, clients, into their environment. But on the other side of that coin, Adam, understanding your audience is going to help you retain those athletes, clients, customers for longer. And that's a big part of this, right? There's always going to be people who fall off the wagon. There's always going to be people that click on the link and purchase an offering who may not necessarily fit your ideal demographic. But this is a huge missing piece at the beginning of the puzzle for a lot of these coaches, is they come in and they say, I want to coach all retired athletes from the age of 25 to 45 so they can go out on their next adventure and crush that thing. Well, that's pretty broad, Adam. Yeah. And there's literally millions of people in there that fit that.
Well, hey, that's why it sounds good, right? Because it sounds like there's lots of people. Right. But, at the end of the day, right, if a product does everything for everyone, it does nothing for anyone, right?
Bingo. I love that.
So focusing that a little better, you can't just train women 20 to 45. First of all, those aren't all the same people.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. 25-year-old client is much different, will have different goals or find different value, which is a key term, in your training than, say, a 45-year-old woman will, or man. You know what I mean? Those folks are different. Their goals are probably different. Your job is
as people go through life, it's definitely pretty people's goals as they go through life when it comes to sports and health, they tend to become less egocentric. They tend to be more, a little bit more kind of like focused on health outcomes and things like that rather than performance outcomes. Now that's obviously not true for everybody, but there's a general path toward that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that goes back to my point. If you know your audience is sitting in that, 9 to 5 range, a little bit older adults, they may just need to get into the facility or do something remote and just feel like they're working, right, Adam? Opposed to someone who's maybe a more dedicated athlete. Obviously, you have your college, your high school ranks where their goals are very, very hyper-focused. You have to treat those people differently. And if you try and please everyone, you're going to lose part of that audience, right? Yeah. I see that all the time in the marketplace. It starts on square one, day one, knowing the value you provide to your people.
So, we had two good conflicting examples here, where it basically comes down to knowing your audience, which is, for me, I'm a science guy. I'm into, evidence-based everything. And sure. But, at the end of the day, if you're training gym people who are adults, right, who are not particularly interested in performance and they want to get better at some stuff and they want some measurable outcomes, but maybe at the end of the day, it's just about feeling good about exercising, right? Maybe it's more like process goals. Man, I just want to keep on, going basically. Yeah. Well, you have to apply your programming and your coaching is probably going to look a lot different than if I'm coaching a D1 basketball athlete, right? 100%. Those things, one of those people is much more focused and dedicated. They're willing to put in the work that may not be as much fun, that kind of thing. Right. But you had a really good example to the counter of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sometimes we get larger, let's say Instagram influencers on here who they're very visible. People have a very aspirational idea. Ooh, I want to be like that person. And then this person, this coach will come to the table with an offering that maybe has too broad of an audience or doesn't really fit with their demographic, the people who are following him. And those folks jump into that offering, let's say a training program, and it's not what they expected. They say, I want to be like you, look like you, be as strong and powerful as you. And maybe the offering doesn't necessarily match up. Their expectations are a little skewed, and then they wind up leaving.
I mean, here's a ridiculous example. If I'm, Arnold Schwarzenegger, well, that's not a terrible example, but I'm a well-known bodybuilder and I put out a mobility program.
You hit it.
That's actually what my audience is really looking for.
Right.
And you had that example of, another well-known athlete in a specific niche who put out kind of basically a GPP program.
You got it.
Well, okay, but that's not really what your audience is following you for, probably in that case. So social media is tricky like that because got a lot of people. It's a wide net. They can follow you for free, basically, cost them their attention.
Yeah.
But the reason they're following you and the ones who might actually be a really good fit for the product you can produce that's unique to you, is going to be certainly a smaller segment of those people, but they're much more likely to turn into your lifelong, athletes.
You got it. Narrow your focus.
That's going to do it for us today. Go to TrainHeroic.com, start a 14-day free trial. We've got new pricing in there starting at $9.99 to accommodate any kind of coach. So go ahead and get started today.
All right, now it's time for the BodyByBoyleOnline.com. Hit the gym with the strength coach segment. Become an insider to Mike Boyle's strength and conditioning with staff meetings, in-services, and complete access to the MBSC programs. Check it out at BodyByBoyleOnline.com. All right, today I have on Erica Suter. She's a performance coach to youth soccer players for about 9 years now, and she believes in a holistic yet simple approach to their physical development, and that it needs to be done for the length of their athletic careers, if not lifetime. And she talks about once they nail down their physical training, sleep, nutrition, stress management, friendships, you don't hear that a lot, community, and their purpose, I might want to talk about that too, their journey becomes easy and it sets them up for a life with confidence. And she's also been the author of a couple of books, Total Youth Soccer Fitness and Total Youth Soccer Fitness 365. She has another secret project coming up. Maybe we'll get her to spill the beans on that. Erica, thanks for doing this.
Hey, thanks for having me. Super excited about this.
All right. Well, I did say this to you before, and I do want to mention it on the show. I talked to you a little bit about finding guests. And for me, a lot of it has to do with social media. Like I look at social media, I see what people have to say. I see if they have an opinion. And I think you do a really good job, number one, on your Twitter account, where I think there's, you have to put yourself out there. And I think you do a really good job. I think if anybody that follows you knows where you stand, you have a simple stance, but it's direct. And so I just want to say to everybody else out there, when you're looking to get noticed or send some information out there, you have to do it. Erica's super consistent. She does it a lot. And it's why she's on the show now, because she caught my attention. So Erica, I just want to say, first of all, great job with that.
Yeah, thank you. It's, I think you nailed it as far as the consistency. Now, as far as being on social media, I'm on there for 3 reasons. And the first one is selfishly, I like to create content. So I like to write on my blog. I just started a podcast now. And the second reason is I want to help coaches. So, coaches at the grassroots level with youth. So not just soccer, but all team sports, and just to give them simple, practical steps for them to start incorporating physical training at practices. And then the third reason I'm on is just to highlight my athletes, because they love the recognition, and they're just a part of social media. That's their life. So I really like to highlight their achievements as well. And I have all those 3, and that allows me to have consistent content almost daily. So, I'm happy to be on there and to just spread the message.
Yeah. And another thing I always love when I have on like these advanced, like strength and conditioning coaches who were really high level athletes. So you went to Johns Hopkins, you were an NSCAA All-American collegiate soccer player. You played at semi-pro soccer level in Brazil. And it's important because I think because you've taken that journey yourself. And I actually wasn't going to talk about this first, but you talk about building, and you just mentioned it too, like highlighting your athletes, and you talk about building empowered humans off the field. And you also talk about this idea about communicating how, like the training, how important that piece, and integrating it with the soccer skills. Is that something that really you didn't have kind of growing up in the sport, not from parents, et cetera, but from the sport, like with training and coaching, and that you saw a gap and that you feel like you're trying to partially to help fill that gap?
So actually the opposite. So I was lucky enough in middle school to have a strength coach. And this actually was probably when even like Mike Boyle and all those guys were just like starting to make a name for themselves. So I had strength and conditioning in my life all through middle school, high school, and then part of college. So now that I'm 30 years old, I'm starting to see the benefits of it all, which is why, I preach, yes, performance, speed development, power development, build strength, injury reduction. I preach all of that. But that's just really me doing my job as a strength coach. So now I'm at the point where I'm just like, I really want to help these kids see the benefit of this, even just beyond what's happening on the field. So whether it's they're in a better mood, or they're able to focus more in school and retain information better, or they're able to be more creative, or maybe they're a better daughter or better friend. So that's where I'm at in my career. And I just really want to bring in all those other pieces to performance to really help these kids just get into good habits for a lifetime.
Yeah. How do you communicate that though specifically? Because I think, for example, if we say right now, during COVID and everybody's talking about, hey, gym should be open because, here's the benefits, A, B, C, D, E. And like a lot of times we're not telling people those benefits. These are the benefits, like being in a better mood, better daughter. But what are you doing specifically to talk to your athletes to say, this is what you need to do?
Right. Yeah. A lot of people say the tag, the headline, oh yeah, I'm empowering athletes off the field. And it's like, okay, well, like, how are you actually doing that?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we're doing a couple of things. So the main thing that I do weekly with my athletes is we take inventory. So the inventory is divided into several categories that absolutely impact their performance. So their sleep, their nutrition, their stress management, their friendships and their relationships, their community, and their purpose for even doing this in the first place. So we're always checking in and we're ranking those categories. And as groups, like we'll talk about it at the end of a workout, and we'll call each other out on where we're falling short. And this was the one thing I didn't have growing up. I just had the physical training. But if I had things like sleep and nutrition and who to surround yourself with, I think I could have optimized my performance a little bit more. So I'm just trying to make sure that athletes are really checking in with themselves and taking inventory, and not just when they're finishing a session with me. I always tell them, you guys eventually need to get into the habit of running this inventory through your head every single day. Where do you need to fill the bucket? Or where did you do well? Where did you have some wins? And what did you do to change that and to become better? So it's really just a continuing conversation. Another thing we'll do is we'll do an exercise called cut out the noise. So what are some things in your life that you can cut out that you think are hindering your performance? So a lot of athletes will say social media. They need to cut back on that. Or maybe they need to cut back on a certain friend group they're hanging out with because there's too much drama, and that's impacting their nervous system and their stress response when they step on the field. So we just do all these different activities just to get them thinking about all the other pillars that just enhance performance, as long as they're dialed in.
Yeah, I love that because I have a couple hockey players and they're so serious. They're prep school kids. They're going into junior hockey as well. And one of them's already signed Division I college. I think they're going into 11th grade. But the thing is, I try to talk to them without being preachy. So like you talked about the friendships, because I never really hear people talk about, or strength coaches talk about this. Like I talk to those guys about, listen, you guys are working your butts off in here. You took this time to do what you need to do. You need to make sure that you're not hanging around with some of these kids who don't have the same mission as you do. And that's another thing I know you talked about a little bit where I saw in your bio, talking about that mission, talking about like, what is it? Where do you want to go? And, keep that at the forefront to make sure that you're doing those things. You guys talk to them about goals and their mission when you're talking about what they want to achieve in life?
Yeah, I mean, that's like a focal point of our training. It's like as soon as they come in, the evaluation, the first thing I do is ask, why are you here?
Yeah.
And you know, like some kids, if they're really young, middle and early high school, you know, they're just, they don't really know. They just say, oh, well, speed and agility, and they'll be extremely vague. But eventually, as we continue to work together, I want to dig a little bit deeper than just speed and agility. Okay, well, why do you want to really train for speed and agility? Like, what's the emotion you're attaching to that? And some will say, well, I'm just so sick of feeling slow, or I don't feel confident. I just feel weak. And they're attaching a feeling to it. And that's when we can really get some work done. And that's when they're able to stick to the process longer, because they have that deeper meaning attached to it. And whenever things get hard in the gym, when they're pushing through the uncomfortable reps, or they have to do their daily non-negotiables that I give them to do at home, they remind themselves of that deeper purpose, and they're like, okay, that's why I'm doing this. That's why I stick to the basics day in and day out. And I see Erica's program not as a short-term transactional program. It's a long-term transformational program. And I really want athletes who are coming into my building to get to that point, because my philosophy is I can't give you the quick fix. I mean, physically, this takes a long time. Mentally, this takes a long time, especially with kids I'm working with. They're going through their growth spurts. So we got to get past that phase, and then we can really start to build. Then we can really start to load them up. So yeah, I just try to have them dig out that deeper purpose to be there.
I will say too, it can give you a little ammunition as well as a coach when you find these things out, to say, you know, when you see them eating that bag of Doritos and you're like, hey, that's not going to get you, you know, faster. That's going to slow you down. That's going to keep you in the weeds. Remember, this is why you're here. I think it helps from a coaching perspective, like knowing everything you can know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to tell the kids that, look, like when we take inventory on these things like nutrition and sleep, like there's gonna be some weeks where you're just off. Like, it happens. So I want to make that clear to them as well. You're not always going to be perfect, but it's just a good skill to analyze where you're at and where you need to fill and where you can just improve, but also just be forgiving of yourself if you have an off week, because it happens to all of us, whatever's going on, like family issues, a bunch of tests or exams in school that week. So I just try to communicate with them, hey, like, evaluate where you're at and just do the best you can.
Yeah, I love it. I really do. I love this idea about inventory, because like you said, it really encompasses so many different things that gets them thinking, at least, because you can't do it all. And it's going to get them thinking when they're not with you about some of the things that Erica's teaching me, or, yeah, oh, wait, I'm doing this or I'm doing that, when they're not with you. And, you know, like you said, the more consistent you are with that inventory, you're doing it every week, you're just ingraining it. And that is how you empower humans off the field. You get them to have autonomy and take control of what they're doing.
Yeah, the autonomy is huge. And it's gotten to the point with some of these kids that they just run the inventory themselves, and they know how to improve their sleep, whether it's getting off the phone an hour before bed or dimming the lights earlier than normal. Like, they know what to do. I try to not tell them all the answers. I like to formulate questions and just ask, hey, what do you value? Where do you want to go? What's the end goal here? And what are you currently doing now that's serving that, or that is maybe hindering it or slowing you down from getting to where you want to go? So I found when I ask those questions, then they're able to really search within themselves. Oh, shoot, like, I actually value this, or I need to change this because this hasn't been working for me. So it's nice to give them that autonomy as well.
Absolutely. Let's move on to get a little more specific now. And you wrote an article with Joe Eisenman, Girls, Growth and Gains, Truth of the Young Female Athlete. And I love what you guys talk about in the article. And it kind of slapped me in the face, like, oh man, yeah, I didn't even really think about this. Too often when we talk about youth sports and athletic development, we give examples of boys. There was 3.4 million females last year who participated in high school sports. And a lot of the research has been obviously on the boys probably. And we give examples of the boys. So let's talk about some of these things, like why we should be thinking about, because there was a time when I remember, well, no, we don't treat them any differently. Yeah, we're trying to do the right thing and say, hey, we treat young females just like we do our boys, but really we shouldn't be. Talk to us about this idea about this first of all, the hormonal and structural perspective.
Yeah, so the girls are going to reach the growth spurt a lot earlier than boys. So that's one thing coaches have to keep in mind, and they have to really educate themselves on what are the physiological structural changes going on that can impact performance. So when girls are 10 to 12, sometimes 13 years old, their performance might wane a little bit. So whether it's speed slowing down or just more not coordinated, or they're not as balanced. Boys tend to, their performance sometimes improves during this time, but girls are also growing so rapidly. I mean, their bones, their tendons, their not yet their muscles, but they're also going through their menstrual cycle. So around like age like 12 to 13, and that's like a defining moment of your life. I mean, emotionally, it's a lot for a girl to take on. So it's just good to be aware of all these changes and what are some of the things we can control? Okay, so we can't control the bones growing at such a rapid rate, and potential pain happening in the patellar tendon, or things like growth plate pain and stress fractures. But we can control to reduce the chance of that becoming like a nagging, they call it growing pain. So they just tend to label it as that. So the things that we can control during that time is making sure we're working on their coordination. We're working on their balance, whether that's through fun games or just exposure to a variety of movement, or maybe doing things like bear crawling, crab walking, skipping in all planes of motion, and just getting them used to moving opposite arm, opposite leg, and just exploring and being aware of their bodies in space. And then even beyond that, just this is the time to start focusing on stability of the trunk. And there's a lot of research out there that instability is going to cause a disruption down the chain to the knees and ankles, and there's a lot of research on core training and the effects on ACL injury reduction. So making sure that they're able to stabilize the trunk. And I'll always tell coaches this over and over again: stop doing the sit-ups. Stop doing the sit-ups. Like there's not a moment in the game when an athlete is running max speed or changing direction or doing the most fatiguing and injury-inducing actions in the game where they're like moving their spine and hunching over. Like that, those are the actions where they really need to have control in that area. So I'm very passionate about reinforcing proper core training, and not just like the anterior core, but just tying it all through the hips and the glutes and the low back, and even working up the chain to shoulder stability and posture. So it's coming back to just that holistic approach and just building girls into strong humans during that time, and just constantly reinforcing it, because that's the prime window of motor learning. And then when they get to 14, 15, then it's like, okay, we can start to load them up, because then they start to really build their muscles more.
So first thing, really quick, so you're saying, you don't want to load them up too much during that time. I think with the boys, it's actually advantageous when they're kind of going through that, and then there's all this testosterone coming, and it helps. But what are some things that you really don't want us doing? Can you just elaborate a little bit more during that time when they're first kind of going through that menstrual cycle?
Yeah, so so with a lot of my middle schoolers, I do load them up during that time, but sometimes we'll hang out if it's a new athlete 2 to 4 weeks, so they have a really young training age. We'll master all the movement patterns first. So hinging, crawling, squatting, lunging, and pushing and pulling. So we'll nail that down, but then it's like, okay, you've shown me that you have movement competency. Now we can start to load a squat, do a goblet squat, or even a banded or dumbbell deadlift, especially with girls who are around age 12. And if they're early maturers, then yeah, we'll load them up. One thing that I see coaches doing with that age group is just running them into the ground. Okay. So that could be they're doing like endless jogging laps in the warm up, or they're just doing like 30 minutes of conditioning straight. And at that age, it's still the age where they need to explore, and they need more variety than the jogging, especially if they're a team sport athlete, because those muscles just keep getting overused. And we all know what happens there, overuse injury. And that's like one of the biggest epidemics with young female athletes besides the ACL. So the more coaches can work on coordination and proper core training, and making sure the conditioning is exposing them to a variety of movement. I always say just run an obstacle course for 10 minutes straight or 15 minutes straight. Like, you're better off doing that so that they can build the entirety of their system. So those are the main things. And then another thing is just plyometrics. I mean, plyometrics for this age group gets so butchered, and I don't see enough focus on being able to control the landing, the position of the ankle, knee, and hip, and just stabilizing the trunk. And they're putting young girls through plyometric circuits that look like, I don't know if you've heard of Beachbody's Insanity. Like, it looks like that. And it's like a 40-minute straight circuit, and their knees are unstable, they're fatiguing, they're slouching their posture. And it's like, at that point, you're not getting anything out of the drill. So the plyometrics is definitely a big one, and just reinforcing the technique and just keeping the volume low.
Excellent. You guys talked in the article, it may be optimal to initiate integrative NMT, neuromuscular training programs, during early adolescence, before the period of altered mechanics that increase injury risk. I still want to know, like, what does this mean? Like, what's neuromuscular training programs? Like, what would you consider that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, gosh, I just think it's a fancy term for just proper resistance training at that age. And proper resistance training at that age is just making sure you're mastering the movement patterns. So your deadlifts, your squats, but then progressing it to single leg, and working in some balance, or maybe some plyometrics with some chaos involved, and they have to really focus on their landing, whether it's double leg and then you progress to single leg. So I think neuromuscular training is just, it's not like we're inventing the wheel here, but it's just proper resistance training.
Okay.
So being able to decelerate and to get into a quick athletic stance, and load the hamstrings and glutes and dorsiflex the ankles. Like, I would consider that neuromuscular training, because during this period of growth, like, it's not more muscular gains or hypertrophy, it's more neural. So
yeah. Okay.
That's what I think they mean by that.
Yep. Now, there is a lot of research in ACL. So we do have to bring up the ACL injury piece with young females right now, because it is 4 to 7 times greater in youth female athletes compared to males. And you just talked about now as well, like, really focusing on the core. Have you found that is really a kind of the unfilled bucket with some youth females, and some, like, maybe a piece that people are missing when they're thinking of ACL prevention?
Yeah, the core is a big one, but I mean, knock on wood, I haven't had any athletes who have torn their ACL. So I think that the core stability is working, and it's been a nice 9-year research study. But another thing I want to get across is coaches will ask me, well, or even parents, they'll just DM me and they'll be like, hey, what are like 3 to 5 exercises for the knee? And I'm like, all of them are good. Like your foot, ankle, calf, quads, hamstrings, glutes, core, back, shoulders, even like the entire chain just needs to be strong. And what I'm finding recently is when there's a breakdown at the foot or a weakness in the calf, that's when the knee is going to be extremely unstable. So I want to start from the ground up first. And it could be as simple as we're doing like a 2 to 5 minute balance in our warm up, or we're doing like calf raise iso holds, or we're doing floor get ups and working on our ankle mobility. So just like those things that are simple and you can do in your warm up or every day, we're starting with the base, and then we can address the muscles around the knee, the quads, the hamstrings, and then the glutes, which help to stabilize it. And then we just keep working up, and people are like, wait, well, why are you doing pull-ups or like half kneeling Arnold presses with young girls? And I'm like, well, if their back is weak and their shoulders are slouched, then that's going to inhibit their entire posture, and that's going to ruin a lot of things. It's going to inhibit the glutes. It's going to put more load on the patellar tendon. It's going to decrease range of motion at the hip flexor when they're running at max speed, so they're not going to be as fast. So it's literally like ruining everything. So why not just do all of the exercises to strengthen the body?
Yeah.
So that's been my approach.
It sounds like it's almost like sports specific. Like, no, we need general programming. That's the base. There's going to be a very minor piece, which is sports specific. So, and I did see a really one of your videos that I thought you did a great job with, just talking about that posture and some lateral movement, right? Some change of direction. And you took a dumbbell and you put it in 2 hands and you did a front raise, arm straight, front raise in that really good athletic position, and worked a little bit of that change of direction. So, turning the core on, working with FMS for so long, he always worked on some of these movements of the core first. So, you like with a band or a med ball, turning the core on first, then get into the movement. So it kind of talks about that sequencing. And I love that piece that you did. Obviously, it's a little more advanced, but talking about like working, like learning that posture, because I didn't really think about that. Like that posture you showed in the video, when you had that bad posture, it's affecting so many other things. And obviously it's going to slow you down.
Oh gosh, it's crazy. I mean, it affects so much. I mean, even just like the speed component and being able to reposition your shoulders when you change direction, but even just your nervous system response. So I forget who it is. I think it's a guy named Aaron Alexander. He does a lot of research on how your posture affects your internal state and your anxiety. And what he's been finding is if you're in that slouch posture, you're going to feel anxious, or you're going to be in a more depressive mood. And it's like, well, I don't want any of my girls to walk on the field like that. Like, I want them to walk on the field with, a proud chest, good posture, and like feeling sure of themselves. So the mental piece is so important when it comes to core and just posture training.
Absolutely. Now let's talk a little bit about parents, because you talked about parents have to be patient and forgiving with young female athletes, and be careful before you exclaim to their adolescent girls, you need to get faster. And I think, Coach Boyle and MBSC, they've done a great job in terms of trying to communicate that same message. Like, guys, you have to talk to the parents too, because obviously they're paying the bills. They're the ones who are coming in. They're the ones that, you need to make sure are on the same page. What are some things that you're doing to educate parents?
Yeah, it's just reinforcing to them that this is a long-term process, and I'm very open about it as soon as people come in for an evaluation, and what to expect and what the timeline is based on their goal. And usually it's things like speed and improved agility, and I give them the timeline. I'm like, hey, like, if your daughter is going through a growth spurt right now and we need to just work on her coordination and like return back to basics, it could be like 6 to 12 months until you see like some serious improvements in speed. But then beyond that, after those 12 months, when she gets through the growth spurt, then you're going to see her really getting fast. So I tell them, like, it's a combination of going through good training, being consistent with it, and then just allowing her to get through her growth spurt, and be forgiving of it. And just, again, it's coming back to focusing on what you can control. I'm in the process of actually developing a framework, because I was thinking about when I had peaked as an athlete, and I peaked in college. I mean, that was the ultimate time, it's like, I don't want kids to peak at age 12. Like, I don't need them to be the fastest athlete at age 12. I want them to be the fastest athlete when they get to college, because that's usually the end goal for most of the girls that I work with. And I look back on my career, and it was senior year at Johns Hopkins, fastest I ever was, most conditioned, strongest, All-American, whatever. And I was like, dang, like, all those years of strength and conditioning are coming together, and it really was that process. But I'll give an example of one girl I'm working with now. Last year she was going through a crazy growth spurt. So 11 years old, taller than me, and I'm 5'7". So she was like growing, man. And she was and at the same time she was gaining some fat mass, which is extremely normal as well for girls during that time. So it slowed her down, but we continue to focus on what we could control. The mom was a little bit in my face sometimes, but I just told her, look, like, this is what we're doing, and she is going to blossom if she stays with this, and here's what's going on with her physiologically, because they like to hear the science, and the parents eventually are accepting of that. And now this girl is on one of the top teams in Maryland, and she was on like the third team last year when she was going through a growth spurt. And I'm like, there we go, like, and it's only going to get better. Like, she's been consistent, now she's on the top team, like, let's just keep growing. And just, again, she's 12 years old. Like, we don't want her to peak yet. We just want to keep committing to this process. But it's funny to look back that her mom was like trying to rush it. I'm like, no, like, we need to meet her where she is. And where she is now is she's going through a lot. So
Yeah,
I think that was a cool story. It's cool to see where she's at.
Yeah, it's so cool to be able to kind of watch that development through the years and see, especially when it's gonna sound funny, but when you end up really liking the kid as a human being, right? Like, when they get older and you're like, that's a good kid, and you see like the transformation that they've had in so many different ways over those years, and it's just really rewarding to see that.
Yeah, it's I think that's just the best part of this. It's like, you work with these kids for so long, and hopefully you see them out from middle high school to college, which most of my athletes I have. And it's just cool to see, how their performance improves, but just how they become as people, and they're taking the things that we do as far as the inventory into their own lives. And I've had college girls, like, just very good students academically, and just doing great things. And that's really cool to see too.
Yeah. What are some things that you would just talk to strength coaches about when we're coaching young girls? So when we're speaking to them, what are some things that you would say, listen, when you're talking to these young girls, here's some things, here's the approach I want you to take. Here's some things maybe you might want to rethink that you've seen out there. What are like the approach that maybe is a little different from some of the young boys that we need to speak with young girls about?
Mm-hmm. I think it just comes back to just empowering them, and telling them that you're here add to their performance. And just, I think a lot of girls are kind of hesitant sometimes to get into the weight room, but when we approach it in a positive way, where it's like, hey, like this is going to enhance things like your speed and your power and your ability to go into tackles and feel confident, that tends to help them a lot. And to also just be friends with them, win their hearts over first, and just establish that trust. And you do that by just listening to them, listening to what they need, or sometimes what they're going through. And you don't even need to offer advice. Like sometimes girls just want to vent, and I don't think even male coaches, they shouldn't shy away from it. It's just like any relationship or friendship. Like just listen to people, just be a good person, and just be a sounding board, and then they'll trust you a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a different approach that you need to take sometimes with certain kids, and the main thing is listening to them, because then you're finding out more information, and you could start to figure out how you might need to speak to them. So good stuff, Erica. Let's go over. You're in a sport. Look, I'm sure it's every sport, but soccer tends to have a lot of skills training, a lot of, we don't, they've tended in the past, obviously you had the opposite, where you had some strength training, but to just really focus on, the running and the skills piece. Talk to us about that part of it and what kids really do need.
Yeah, this is a big one. So I hate to admit this, but when I started out back in 2012, I started as a skills trainer. And then I realized that I was part of the problem. Like I was having, whether it was my fault or not, I'm very hard on myself, but I was seeing in young girls just so many overuse injuries and soft tissue injuries that like 60-year-olds should have, and then these are like middle schoolers. This shouldn't be happening. So that's when I was like, okay, I need to just get out of this altogether. And that's when I started to really research the benefit of proper strength and conditioning for the growing female athlete, and just to make sure their bones are durable from stress fractures, and the muscles that safeguard the knee are also durable from ACL and meniscus tears. So I think kids now more than ever need that strength training piece. And it just seems like there's so many skills trainers like coming into the soccer market that are saying they have this like unique product, when, it's really just, it's kind of all the same, to be honest. Like, so I don't want to be a part of that, because I feel like with the injuries on the rise and girls being more prone to ACL, like my role is to fill that bucket, because it's just so skill specific, and they're just constantly overusing all of those muscles over and over and over again, the hip flexors, the quads, and the rest of the body isn't being attacked at all.
Absolutely. Talk to us really quick about your speed training and your philosophy on speed, because you're at that, you have these girls from that young age into that high school and college. Are you running them, are you sprinting them early? When do you feel like, is it like strength training where you're like going to back off until you feel like they have a good biomechanics, or are you going to start sprinting them at a relatively young age, because they're going to do it on the field anyway?
Yeah, I mean, as young as possible, just to expose their system to that level and that max speed. So over 20, 30 yards, even with like, I call them the munchkins. So like 9 to 11-year-old girls, we're sprinting a couple times a week, but that's mainly through like chase games, relays, and just like all these fun different games that we play. And, I don't really need to say much. I just explain the drill. Hey, you need to tag her before she gets to the 30, or you need to snag the penny from her and you guys sprint that way. And then I just exit stage right. And that's it. Like, that's the coaching cue. So at that age, it's important that they just sprint fast through the form of games. And then when they get into high school, then okay, we can start to be a little bit more coachy and work on the knee drive and ball of the foot strike and vertical force production and velocity based training and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, with across all age groups for soccer, especially, like training max speed a couple times a week is the best speed training you can do.
All right, good stuff. I just want to remind everybody, Erica has a couple of really great social media channels on Twitter and Instagram, and really a pretty active blog at ericasuter.com. We're going to have links to all of that on the show notes. But Erica, before I leave, I just want to see if we can get a little something about your next secret project out.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about this one because I feel there's such a need for it, and it is going to be a course for coaches of young girls across all team sports, a video course on how to train them. So
Awesome.
just putting it all in one place, and from core training to hip training to on-field strength, deceleration, plyometric program design. So yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Very cool. Looking forward to that because obviously there's a lot to learn with training the young female athlete, and you do have a podcast now. I don't want anyone else to listen to that if you're gonna at the expense of my podcast. But if you can listen to both of them, that'd be great. But Erica, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing all your knowledge, and just really remind everybody, just go to those social media channels and stay up to date with what she's doing, because she's doing some great work. So Erica, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 296 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Remember, you can try strengthcoach.com out for 30 days, just $1. You'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every single day. To access that offer, go to strengthcoach.com. Click the Join Now button to get started on your trial. Special thanks to Chris Pryor and the folks over at Perform Better. Right now, free shipping on orders over $49. The PB app is coming out soon. All the recordings from the summer series will be on there, so check that out at performbetter.com. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Erica Suter for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength and conditioning, performance enhancement, and training the young female athlete. Thanks to Adam and Tim and TrainHeroic. Coach Boyle and I use TrainHeroic to deliver all of our online training, so head over to TrainHeroic.com to start your free 14-day trial. Thanks to Great Cook and Functional Movement Systems. Check them out at functionalmovement.com. My name is Anthony Random. My book, Be Like the Best, consists of 50 interviews with top fitness pros, and after each interview is a Be Like, which is an action step or a challenge that will help you be like the best. I also have the Be Like the Best workbook, which is a collection of all of those Be Like. So check all that out at continuefit.com. That's going to do it. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.